Brandon, thank you for your time. Appreciate your time. What to you is the bigger story right now in college football? Chaos in the top 25 or the coaching carousel?
It's the coaching carousel by far. It's what people are reading the most that we've even noticed at CBS Sports. And, a lot like recruiting, it's like you're selling hope to a fan base whenever you fire a head coach and start searching for a new one. Anything seems possible, especially in a coaching carousel as wild as this one's going to be, where there's going to be so many jobs and so many possibilities.
Brandon, the biggest, hammer to drop this week was on Billy Napier. And this is one that everybody saw coming. Now there's others we'll ask you about later on, but does Florida and do a lot of these big schools, do they operate under the belief that their job is still a lot better than the jobs that some of these coaches that have now that they're going after, when the reality is Curt Cignetti maybe kind of eternally popped that balloon for modern college football last week when he decided to stay at Indiana?
Yeah, both can be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, Curt Cignetti is, he's been around for a while. He's advanced in age, and he knows that he can do something at Indiana that's never been done before. He's already proven that he can win anywhere he goes. And why, to him, why would you go to a Penn State or even a Florida and put so much more stress on yourself, where if you win 9 games or 10 games one year, they see you almost as a failure at a place like that. And Indiana is not going to be like that, at least not for the next several years. So there's that. And then also some coaches just get sick of moving around. Some are willing to do it a lot. Some just aren't. But there's going to be plenty of interest, obviously, in the jobs at Penn State and Florida, and both are still premier jobs. I would say Florida is the better job between the two right now. And at the end, Florida might end up actually being the better job that becomes open at this point. But, there's a lot of resources, a lot of support around at Florida. And they've got a roster that, quite honestly, is built to contend for a college football playoff spot next year, if you're able to keep it together. And then if you're able to get a coach in that's a big name and is also able to complement that roster with great additions from the transfer portal, all the more better. But Florida is a very enticing job for a lot of reasons.
Brandon, are there enough good coaches out there to fill 10-plus vacancies with potentially more on the way, or are we just going to be a lot of guys swapping places here?
You'll see a couple swap places, I'm sure, but there will be some hires that probably make you go, whoa, I didn't really see that one coming. And not necessarily because it's a big name, but because maybe a school goes a little bit of a different direction than you're expecting. Because a lot of these schools that have already entered the market and are preparing for the ones that will enter the market, so they've got to be, they got to strategize, right? They can't just go, well, let's go after this guy because 8 other schools are going to go after them. But what really are your chances of getting that coach, this coach, that coach? And so some are going to have to come up with plans B through F and start looking at that and hammering away at what that might look like. So this is going to be a big opportunity, I think, potentially for a lot of assistant coaches and maybe some lower level coaches, even on the FCS level, to get bumped up, and not necessarily in one of the big jobs, but within the lower levels of the FBS and even the mid levels. And listen, in college football, it's proven, and we've seen it, that if you can win on one level and then another level, you can win anywhere. That's why guys like Lance Leipold at Kansas, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, they have been successful everywhere they've been, and they bring that with them wherever they go, and they just win. Curt Cignetti is another. I think that people need to start realizing, and some have, obviously, because of those hires I just mentioned, that just because you're an FCS coach or a D2 coach doesn't mean you're not as good as some of the top dogs in the SEC or the Big Ten. Coaching is coaching. But in this day and age, I think coaching is less important than it was 5-10 years ago because of the NIL era. If you got a top 5 roster out there, it doesn't really take a lot of game day adjustments and coaching to, beat up on the middle of the pack.
Brandon, I know that when a coach is fired and the boosters and donors will write checks, et cetera, or even perhaps that's part of when they get hired too, but how much we hear about programs and universities, et cetera, athletic departments needing more money. They're finding ways to scratch and claw for more money. How many hundreds of millions of dollars you think in the last 5 years or so, or 10 years, has been lost because of bad hires?
Well, I mean, there's no telling. But I do know that, among the coaches that have been fired already this season, it's added up to at least $114.1 million in buyout money. And that's just the head coaches. You also got to buy out assistant coach contracts, support staffers, and everything else. I mean, we're listen, this is a billions of dollars industry, and you're going to see a lot of changes this year. They're going to, we're going to get north of $200 million here probably by mid-November in buyouts. And they'll only keep climbing from there. But I wrote a story last week about the buyout bubble and whether it'll ever pop. And I talked to athletic directors, search firm executives, and agents, and they all agree that this is just crazy, the situation they got themselves into. But none of them really are willing to be the one that goes out on a limb and goes, we're just not going to give you a fully guaranteed contract, or we're not going to give you a 75% guaranteed contract, because the market's the market. And if you don't do that, they're afraid you're going to lose the coach that you really want. And this is a different type of business because, the AD isn't just in a vacuum making a decision by himself. They got a board of trustees to answer to. They have a president to answer to. And emotions always overcome business sense in college athletics a lot of times. And if they zero in on a guy and they really want him, and the agent's saying, well, we want this, more often than not, that school is going to give in and give them whatever they want.
I think the bigger issue is when they get to that second contract, Brandon. Look, Florida State is in a pickle with Mike Norvell right now financially. Now, we all know where it's probably headed with Mike Norvell, Hugh Freeze, Luke Fickell, those guys. Like, it's down the road of they're probably not going to be there next year. But in Mike Norvell's case in particular, look, he leveraged a situation where he may not have even gotten the job at Alabama into this fantastic contract after a 19-game winning streak, and that's all fine. But they made emotional decisions, and now they're going to have to pay $50 million to a guy to go away.
Yeah, we're going to have about $58 million after this season if they fire him. And that's the situation, the business we're in. I mean, even consider this. I mean, Brent Venables at OU got a contract extension after being just mediocre or having a losing record or whatever, or 6-6, whatever that record was. And no one was calling to steal him away, but they gave him a contract extension. Credit the agents, man. They could sell a lot of stuff to these schools. They can go, hey, we're suffering in recruiting right now because they don't know if their coach is going to be around a year or two. But if you sign them to an extension and show them that, then they'll believe that coach is going to be around. There's a lot of ways to negotiate and get what you want as a coach.
Brandon, the off the field, a lot of times now can be more interesting than the on the field, especially during the off season. But man, somehow the on the field has been able to match so far this season. I feel like all the off the field stuff. I know this is general, but there's just so much out there. So what has stood out to you, for better or worse, from what you've seen over these first 8-9 weeks in terms of maybe teams that aren't quite what you thought one way or the other, or just games or surprises? What's kind of been the story to you of this first half of the football season?
Yeah, it's complete parody. A colleague of mine, Chris Hummer, wrote a story about this on Friday about how if you look back, everybody kind of considers 2007 as the craziest year we've had, like really in the modern era here of college football. And this year's actually trumped that as far as just the amount of upsets and preseason top 10 teams that have fallen, average scores and things like that. And that was before this past week where we saw 5 undefeated teams lose, which was the most amount of teams that are undefeated to lose this late in the season since 2015. We also had 4 top 10 teams fall. This is the new era. The scores are a little bit tighter because NIL money and the transfer portals allow that talent to kind of get spread out. As far as just like individual teams that surprised me, I'd almost want to say Miami, but it doesn't, because Mario Cristobal is like good for a game or two every year like that against Louisville, where they lose out of nowhere. I'll say that Oregon is so much better than I thought they were going to be, because they had to replace a lot of guys, especially offensively. And they look like a national championship contender even after that loss to Indiana. And Indiana as well. I mean, I thought they'd take a step back this year, and they've actually maybe taken a step forward after being in the playoff last season. They look better than they did last year. And to stay in the Big Ten, Ohio State, that defense is better than it was last year. And I thought it couldn't get much better, especially after they lost most of their starters. And it's a generational type defense, one of the better ones we've seen.
Brandon, when you look at just college football in general, I was thinking about this the other day. And I know the article that was written about maybe go to an NFL style with divisions and whatever else. How are fans, you think, going to accept that 9-3 in the regular season, which normally would be just unacceptable, might be pretty damn good?
It will take time. But at some point they will get used to it. It's like the Overton window. It's just going to slide over there slowly, and we'll get used to it. I also think it'll help that if this season, which is looking more and more likely of every week, we get a 9-3 team into the playoff, it'll kind of hit us, right? We almost got close to that happening last season with Alabama, South Carolina, and even for that matter, Illinois, that all had arguments to make the playoff as 3 losses. So it's just going to take some time. But once we see that first 3-loss team in the playoff, I think that'll start opening that door a little bit more.
Brandon, who are your Heisman favorites right now?
I really like Ty Simpson. Fernando Mendoza has been incredible. It's really turned into a quarterback trophy again. We had been trying to move away from that, it seemed, with receivers being in the running and winning it and others. But the best players out there so far that have been more consistent have been the quarterbacks. Ty Simpson's just been incredible. Ever since that week 1 loss, he has really bounced back, has led that team to some really great performances. And if Mendoza, if he keeps putting up great numbers and they keep winning, they go undefeated, and somehow win the Big Ten title against Ohio State. I don't know how Mendoza, you keep him out of New York and maybe give him the trophy.
Oh, one more question. I asked you about the coaches coming and going. When do ADs start to feel heat, like, for example, Cohen at Auburn? Because I believe he's hired, 2 already, and about maybe 3 that he's going to have to fire. When does that start to take effect on their level?
Well, with Cohen at Auburn, he didn't hire Brian Harsin.
Okay.
That was the AD before him, and he got fired pretty much for making that decision to hire Brian Harsin. Cohen, I think, would be okay because later down the road, they're going to have a lot to judge on him. Whoever the next coach is at football, but also how Stephen Pearl works out as the head coach replacing Bruce Pearl. The one to watch, I think, is at Wisconsin. Chris McIntosh, former player there, who's now the AD, releasing a kind of a vote of confidence statement today about Luke Fickell, saying, hey, we're going to pour more resources into the program. And though it might not be immediate, it'll be a long-term plan to help us financially and everything, which you could take one of 2 ways, right? You could say, well, that means Luke Fickell's going to stick around and he's asking fans and boosters to give more money, which is a no-win situation. Or he's saying out there, hey, if you show some commitment here, maybe I'll end up getting rid of Luke Fickell. But that's a situation to watch. I think every AD practically gets like a chance to hire like at least 2 or 3 coaches in their career in their main sports, being men's basketball and football, before they're really truly judged. And some of these guys with the large buyouts, that'll really test that. But you also got to consider, like I wrote last week, a lot of these ADs aren't the ones fully responsible for these weird contracts or even some of the hires. It's the president and board of trustees falling in love with the guy and saying, hey, whatever it takes, go get him. And the AD is the one who has to stand in front of the room 3 years later when they fire him and answer for everything. And the board of trustees and the president are only at the press conference when the guy gets hired and everybody's celebrating.
Brandon, I would say Wisconsin, Michael Alford at FSU. And look, with Hugh Freeze, though, in particular, I saw you on your podcast with John and everybody earlier talking about like what Hugh Freeze was supposed to do and how that has not what's the difference between Brian Harsin's short run and Hugh Freeze's run right now?
the one big difference is that Hugh Freeze recruited much better.
Yeah.
The talent level at Auburn is as such right now. You should be contending to be in the playoff. They've got a top 5 receiver room that they can't get the ball to. They have an offensive line that is just getting beat up week after week. And as my co-host Chris Hummer said on the podcast, schematically, offensively, coaches laugh at it. It's so predictable to them. It's easy to defend. And then you have a quarterback in Jackson Arnold who practically almost got Brent Venables fired last year at OU. And that's your answer. That's your guy to bring in to turn the program around. At the most important moments and decisions, Hugh Freeze has not been able to make the right ones. He's brought in 2 transfer quarterbacks over the last few years that have failed. Peyton Thorne from Michigan State, and now Jackson Arnold from OU. He's been unable to develop talent that steps in from the high school level, or even a second or third year guy out of the transfer portal that steps in for them at quarterback or at some of these other positions. And the offense just isn't there. It's a complete failure. And you hire an offensive coach as a head coach to at least make things entertaining offensively. And it's been the exact opposite. And your defense has actually been the strength of the team. But the one good thing he's done is the recruiting, which will set up the next coach potentially, if Hugh Freeze is fired, to be successful next year.
Brandon, good stuff, man. We love having you on. You do a great job. You know how we feel, and I know you like being on with us too. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great week.
All right. See you, David. See you.
Brandon Marcello, CBS Sports. And